A pervasive, quiet tragedy haunts the most complex minds of our time. It is the silent suspicion that one has somehow failed before having even truly begun. One looks around at the world and sees a timeline that does not match one's own. One sees peers who seem to have sprinted into adulthood, effortlessly acquiring the careers, the families, and the social standing that society deems a success. They moved in straight lines. They knew what they wanted at 20, achieved it by 25, and solidified it by 30. And then there is you. Your path has not been a straight line. It has been a spiral. You have started and stopped. You have obsessively pursued a passion, only to abandon it when the meaning drained away. You have spent years in what looks like stagnation, creating nothing visible to the outside world, while internally you were fighting wars and dismantling architectures of thought that others do not even know exist. I would not look upon your timeline with concern. I would look upon it with recognition. There is a specific category of individual whose psychological makeup is so intricate, so heavily laden with the unconscious material of the collective, that they are constitutionally incapable of early, superficial success. To the outside world, you look like a late bloomer. You might even look like a failure. But in the alchemical, deeper reality of the psyche, something else is happening. You are not failing to launch. You are undergoing a gestation period that is proportional to the size of the destiny you are meant to carry. The oak tree does not grow at the speed of the grass. The reason you have not yet succeeded is not because you are broken. It is because you are building a foundation that the early achievers do not possess, a foundation capable of sustaining a skyscraper rather than a tent. We live in a culture that worships the archetype of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal youth. It celebrates the prodigy, the wunderkind, the overnight magnate. This obsession with speed creates a distortion that makes the slow, deep work of the soul feel like indolence. But I have proposed a radical counter-narrative. I have suggested that the first half of life, roughly until the age of 35 or 40, is merely a preparation, a clearing of the throat before the actual speech begins. For the rare personality type, the intuitive, the deep feeler, the analyst, this first half of life is often characterized not by achievement, but by suffering. This suffering is not accidental. It is the friction required to distinguish your true self from the persona that society tried to force upon you. Consider the mechanics of your own mind. While others were content to learn the rules of the game and play by them, you were paralyzed by the need to understand why the game was being played at all. This need for deep understanding is a heavy brake on external progress. It slows you down. While your peers were climbing the corporate ladder, you were likely stuck on the bottom rung, staring at the structure of the ladder itself, realizing it was leaning against the wrong wall. You possess a differentiation of consciousness that prevents you from engaging in mindless action. You cannot just do. You must understand the meaning behind the action before you can commit your energy to it. In a world that rewards swift, unthinking execution, this trait makes you appear hesitant or indecisive. But I would argue that this hesitation is actually a safeguard. It is your soul refusing to invest in a life that is not authentic to you. The danger, of course, is that you internalize this slowness as a defect. You look at the gap between your potential and your reality, and you feel a profound sense of shame. You wonder why you cannot just be normal, why simple tasks drain you, why you require so much solitude to recharge, why you feel an ancient exhaustion even when you have not physically done anything. This exhaustion is the result of processing reality at a higher resolution. You are not just living, you are decoding. Every interaction, every event, every shift in the atmosphere is data that your psyche must integrate. You are carrying the heavy load of consciousness, and like a complex apparatus performing intricate calculations, your period of initiation is significantly longer than that of a simpler mechanism. But once you are integrated, Once you have made the shadow conscious and found your footing, your capability is of a different order compared to those who sprinted early. Nature, one must remember, commits no errors. If you are built this way, it is because life needs this type of human. The world is filled with people who can maintain the status quo. It is filled with people who can follow instructions and keep the machine running. But when the machine breaks, when the old maps no longer work, when a crisis of meaning hits the collective, that is when the early achievers crumble, for they have built their identities on external validation, which can be taken away in an instant. This is where you enter the stage. The late success of the rare personality is not a delayed version of normal success. It is a completely different species of achievement. It is success born of resilience, forged in the fires of introspection, and rooted in a self-knowledge that is unshakable because it was not given to you by the world. It was won by you alone in the dark. This phenomenon is tied to what I have called the process of individuation. For the majority, life is a process of imitation. We copy our parents, our teachers, our culture. But for you, life has been a process of stripping away. You have likely spent your 20s and 30s losing things, losing friends who did not understand you, losing occupations that suffocated you, losing beliefs that turned out to be illusions. This process of subtraction is painful. It feels as if you are going backward. But in alchemy, this is known as the nigredo, the blackening. It is the necessary decomposition of the false self. You had to fail at being normal so that you could succeed at being you. If you had succeeded early, if you had gotten the corner office and the accolades at 25, you would have solidified a mask. You would have become trapped in a persona that was too small for your soul, and you would have woken at 50 in a midlife crisis that would have destroyed you. Your failure was a protection. It kept you fluid, kept you searching, kept you hungry for the real thing. But the waiting room is a dangerous place. It is easy to rot there. The line between gestation and stagnation is razor thin, and many people with your potential fall into the trap of the provisional life. I have described this as the neurosis of those who are always preparing to live but never actually stepping into the arena. You tell yourself, one day, when I am ready, when I have read enough, when I am healed enough, then I will begin. But that day never comes, for the feeling of readiness is an illusion. The shift from the late bloomer to the awakened individual does not happen by thinking. It happens by a specific type of action that bridges the inner and outer worlds. We must understand that your timeline is governed by the archetype of the senex, the wise old man. Even when you are young, you are likely an old soul as a child, serious and contemplative. This gravity is an asset, but in youth it is a burden. It makes you heavy. While others floated on the surface of life, you sank to the bottom. But the treasures are at the bottom. The insights, the wisdom, the understanding of human nature that you have been accumulating while you felt you were falling behind. These are the assets that become invaluable in the second half of life. The world undergoes great shifts. The skills of the early sprinters, rote memorization, following orders, basic competence, will inevitably become obsolete. The skills of the late bloomer, deep empathy, pattern recognition, complex synthesis, and spiritual resilience are becoming the most valuable currency one can possess. You have been playing a long game in a short-term world, and finally the tide is turning in your favor. However, to meet this moment, you must understand the specific transition point you are currently facing. I have called it the metanoia, a turning of the mind. It usually happens between the ages of 35 and 50, but for the rare personality, it can trigger earlier or later depending on the intensity of your inner work. This is the moment where the energy that was previously directed inward towards self-analysis and defense must turn outward. It is the moment the chrysalis breaks. The pain you feel right now, the frustration of unlived potential, is not a sign that you have missed your chance. It is the pressure of the birth canal. You are being squeezed because you are too large for your current life. The failure to fit in was simply life ensuring you did not get comfortable in an existence that was too small for you. The primary psychological obstacle standing between you and your destiny is what I identified as the problem of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal child. This does not mean you are childish. In fact, you are likely hyper-mature in your intellect. But emotionally, there is a part of you that refuses to touch the ground. You live in a state of suspended animation, hovering above reality, terrified that if you commit to one specific path, you will accidentally kill off all the other infinite possibilities of who you could be. You are in love with potentiality, and because of this, you despise actuality. Real life requires compromise. Real life requires grit. Real life is often boring, repetitive, and flawed. Because your mind operates in the realm of the ideal, the perfect, and the absolute, the moment you try to bring your vision down to earth, it feels like a degradation. So you stop. You retreat back into the clouds of your own mind where everything is still perfect because nothing has been tested. This is the provisional life. You tell yourself you are just waiting for the right moment, the right partner, the right opportunity. But deep down, a terrifying thought begins to take root, that perhaps you are not waiting for life to start, but that life is actually passing you by while you analyze it. This is the crisis point. This is the moment where individuals of great potential often falter. The pain of potential unfulfilled becomes a physical weight in the chest. You look at the normal people you once pitied for their simplicity, and you begin to envy them. At least they are living. At least they are in the arena while you are still in the stands, a mere critic of the combatants. But there is a solution. I discovered that the cure for the poor is not to grow up in the way society demands by becoming dull and compliant. The cure is work, but not just any work. It is the work that requires you to bloody your hands. It is the work of dragging your intuition down from the heavens and forcing it into physical matter. This is why so many of you feel a sudden, violent urge to build something, to write, to create, or even to physically train your bodies as you age. Your soul is screaming for friction. It is tired of the air. It wants the earth. And this brings us to a crucial realization. You cannot do this alone. The isolation that protected you in your youth becomes a prison in your adulthood. You need to find the others, not to join a herd, but to find a community of understanding. I have often spoken of an aristocracy of the spirit, a silent network of individuals who are awake to these deeper realities. Once you commit to the descent, to landing your craft upon the rough terrain of reality, you unlock the most potent weapon in the late bloomer's arsenal, the shadow. For the first half of your life, you were likely a good person. You were empathetic, sensitive, and perhaps a bit of a pleaser. You repressed your aggression, your ambition, and your desire for power because you were taught that these things were bad. You associated power with the corrupt authority figures you saw around you, so you stifled your own drive in a noble attempt to be harmless. But I must warn you, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To succeed later in life, you must integrate your shadow. You must reclaim the parts of yourself you threw away. The ambition you thought was greed, that is actually the fuel you need to build your life's work. The anger you thought was destructive, that is the boundary-setting energy that will stop people from exploiting you. The late bloomer succeeds because they finally stop apologizing for their power. When a youth wields power, they are often dangerous, because they have not yet learned empathy. But you have spent decades mastering empathy. You have spent years understanding suffering. Therefore, you can be trusted with power. When you finally tap into that reservoir of aggression and drive, you will not become a tyrant, you will become a force of nature. You will move with a precision and an authority that the early achievers cannot replicate, because their power comes from their ego, while yours comes from the totality of your being. This integration of the shadow is what gives the late success its distinct flavor. It is not frantic, it is not desperate, it is formidable. Have you ever noticed how some older individuals possess a presence that feels heavy, almost gravitational? That is the weight of the integrated shadow. They are not trying to impress you. They are simply there, fully occupying their own space. They are no longer asking the world for permission to exist. This is where you are heading. The hesitation you felt in your youth was your intuition telling you that you were not ready to handle this level of voltage yet. If you had succeeded at 20, your ego would have inflated until it burst. You would have become addicted to the applause. But now you do not need the applause. You need the work. You are driven by an internal imperative, a duty to the talent that has been entrusted to you. Society often views the midlife transition as a crisis. They see the person quitting their stable occupation, ending the dead marriage, or finally starting the novel they have talked about for 10 years, and they whisper, "They are having a breakdown." I correct this. I say, no, they are having a breakthrough. The walls of the persona are cracking, yes, but only so the self can emerge. The late success is almost always preceded by a period of chaos. If you are currently in a state of chaos, if your life feels as if it is falling apart, take heart. This is the alchemical fire. The structure that is collapsing is the one that was too small for you. You are not dying. You are shedding. Consider the bamboo tree. For 5 years, you water it and nothing happens. It remains a tiny shoot barely visible above the soil. To the outside observer, it is a failure. It is dead. But underground, a massive, complex root system is spreading, anchoring itself deep into the earth, preparing to support a weight that does not yet exist. Then in the 5th year, it explodes. It grows 80 feet in 6 weeks. Did it grow 80 feet in 6 weeks, or did it grow 80 feet in 5 years? You are the bamboo. The silence of your last decade was not empty. It was pregnant. You were growing roots while everyone else was growing leaves. And because of this, when you finally rise, you will not be toppled by the first wind that blows. The early achievers often have shallow roots. A single crisis of reputation or fortune can destroy them. But you have already survived the crisis of meaning in the dark. You are anti-fragile. This brings us to the unique advantage of the afternoon of life. I have divided life into the morning youth, expansion, ego building, and the afternoon maturity, contraction, soul making. The culture belongs to the morning. It is loud, bright, and frantic, but the treasure belongs to the afternoon. The success achieved in the second half of life is sweeter because it is not chased. It is attracted. You stop chasing things that run away from you. You become the kind of person who naturally attracts what belongs to them. The desperation fades. You realize that you have already survived your worst days. You have faced the void and lived. What is left to fear? This lack of fear is magnetic. It draws opportunities, resources, and people to you. The final and most profound aspect of succeeding later in life is the phenomenon of synthesis. For years, you have likely felt like a collection of broken parts. You have a little knowledge of psychology, a random skill in craft, a deep understanding of history, and a strange obsession with mechanics. To the logical mind, these things do not fit together. You have been criticized for being a jack of all trades, master of none. But I would correct this. I would say, you are not scattered. You are constellating. You have been gathering the ingredients for a recipe that no one else has ever cooked before. The early achievers specialize. They become very good at one narrow thing, but the late bloomer integrates. When your moment finally arrives, it does not look like a linear promotion. It looks like a sudden geometric alignment of everything you have ever learned. All the wasted time, all the abandoned pursuits, all the painful detours suddenly lock into place to form a singular, unique competence that the world has never seen. You realize that you needed the melancholy to understand depth, you needed the isolation to develop vision, you needed the technical skills to build the container. This is your magnum opus, your great work. It is not just a career, it is the complete expression of your soul's pattern.